Imagine you're walking along a quiet trail when you suddenly look down and see a snake just a few feet away. You freeze. The snake isn't charging, it isn't moving toward you, it isn't even staring at you. So your first thought might be simple: maybe it hasn't even noticed me. But what if that's exactly where we misunderstand the snake? Because a snake doesn't need to look at you the way a human does to detect that you're there. It may be picking up movement, chemical signals, vibrations, and in some species, even the heat coming from your body. So while you stand there thinking the snake is doing nothing, it may already be processing information about the world around it. Today, we're going to follow that moment from the human side, then step into the snake's sensory world and discover what a snake may actually notice when a human suddenly appears. Our observer is walking through a natural trail. He's not looking for a snake, and he's certainly not trying to approach one. Then he notices something on the ground. A snake. He stops immediately. For a moment, his imagination takes over. Maybe the snake will move. Maybe it will come closer. Maybe it's watching him. But none of that is actually happening. The snake is simply there, still. And this is where something interesting happens. The human is judging the snake by what he can see. But the snake experiences the environment through a very different collection of senses. So instead of asking, "Why isn't the snake looking at me?" we should ask a more interesting question. What information is the snake actually receiving? The first thing to consider is movement. Our observer takes one small step backward. The snake doesn't need to understand the person's intentions. It doesn't need to know his name, and it doesn't need to form a human-style opinion about him. What matters is the physical information surrounding it. Movement can be important. A large object suddenly moving nearby is different from an environment that remains completely still. And a snake's response can depend on its species, its surroundings, the distance between them, and whether it feels threatened. So the snake isn't necessarily asking a human-style question like, "Who is this?" Its sensory system is dealing with something much more basic. What changed around me? And that difference is incredibly important. Now look at the snake's tongue. That tiny flick may look almost meaningless to us, but snakes use their tongues to collect chemical information from the environment. Those chemical particles can then be processed through a specialized sensory system involving the vomeronasal organ, also known as Jacob's organ. In simple terms, the snake is sampling information from the world around it. Our human observer sees a quiet forest. The snake is dealing with a world full of chemical clues. So when we say, "the snake is just sitting there," we may be missing half the story. Its body may be still, but its sensory world isn't. And in some snakes, the story gets even more unusual. Pit vipers, for example, have specialized heat-sensing organs called pit organs. These organs help them detect infrared radiation from warm objects. To us, the human observer is simply standing there. But to a heat-sensitive snake, a warm body can provide another layer of information. This doesn't mean the snake sees the world exactly like a thermal camera. It's more accurate to think of heat as an additional sensory signal that can help the snake detect warm objects. So imagine the scene again. A person is standing several feet away. The snake appears completely still. But depending on the species, the environment may be giving that snake information through channels the human cannot consciously experience. And then there's another source of information we rarely think about: the ground itself. Our observer shifts his foot. He may not even realize how much information that movement can create. Snakes can detect vibrations through their bodies and through contact with the ground. The snake doesn't need to think. A human is scared. We shouldn't put human thoughts into an animal's mind without evidence. Instead, think about it this way. The snake's nervous system is receiving signals. Something moved. Something vibrated. Something changed. There may be chemical information, and in some species, there may also be thermal information. The snake doesn't need to understand the scene the way we do. It simply has a different way of experiencing it. But now comes the question most people really want answered. If that same human appeared again tomorrow, would the snake recognize him? This is where we need to separate science from imagination. We shouldn't automatically assume a snake thinks, "Oh, that's the same person I met yesterday." But snakes are capable of learning, and research has found learning and memory abilities in various snake species. So the more useful question isn't necessarily, does a snake recognize me like a human recognizes a friend? It's this: can previous experiences change what the snake does next? And that question is much more interesting, because animal intelligence doesn't have to look like human intelligence. Our observer looks at the snake again. It's still barely moving. He might think, it's ignoring me. But that's the mistake. We often judge an animal's attention by human behavior. We expect attention to look like staring, recognition to look like excitement, curiosity to look like approaching. But a snake's sensory world was shaped around very different needs. So the snake may not be ignoring the world. We may simply be looking for the wrong signs. So the next time you see a snake in the wild, don't immediately ask, did it notice me? Ask something more interesting. What is it detecting that I can't? Because the most fascinating thing about a snake may not be how little it seems to notice. It may be how much information it can quietly gather while looking like it's doing absolutely nothing. The world looks different from inside another mind.